Hello, my name is Dr. Sharon Amelie Zamani. I'm a consultant clinical psychologist in North Tyneside CAMHS, and this is a short workshop on anxiety. We're going to talk a little bit about what anxiety is, how it affects our thoughts and our behaviour, and look at some strategies to try and help manage it. This presentation will be done by myself and my colleague Shona Gazga, who is an assistant psychologist in North Tyneside CAMHS.
Okay, so a bit of a session overview. We'll be starting by discussing what is anxiety. We'll then talk about the anxiety response, so that's the fight, flight or freeze response. We'll talk about how anxiety feels, why we may feel anxious, what keeps anxiety going. We'll also discuss some patterns of unhelpful thinking. We'll discuss ways of managing anxiety, and then we'll finish by giving you some helpful resources. So we could start by discussing what is anxiety. So anxiety is a normal emotion. It helps us to cope with difficult, challenging and dangerous situations. It's really common. We all feel worried, we all feel anxious and we all feel stressed from time to time. It's an unpleasant feeling that you might describe best as feeling very nervous or wound up. Anxiety can start to become a problem when it stops you from enjoying normal life. It could start to affect your schoolwork, family relationships, friendships, and the way that you would normally socialise. It can sometimes last for extended periods of time. It could last days, weeks, or even longer. You may have anxious thoughts around yourself. The thoughts could be around other people, or they could be about how you think other people feel about you. You may also have anxious thoughts about the world around you and what's to come in the future.
The anxiety response is caused by a part of the brain called the amygdala. This part of the brain is like a panic alarm when we think we're in danger, so it tells our body to get ready to either fight, flight, or freeze. The fight, flight, or freeze response is activated when there is a danger, for example, coming near a crocodile. It puts your body into automatic pilot, so you respond to the danger without you having to think about it. So you might fight, yell and wave your arms to scare it. You might flee by running away from the crocodile, or you might freeze, which is to stay still until the crocodile passes. This fight, flight or freeze response keeps us safe. However, it can happen when something feels dangerous but really isn't. For example, when you have to speak in front of a class. So you might feel jittery or uncomfortable. You may snap at people, that's the fight response. You may have a hard time thinking clearly, the freeze response, or avoid doing it, a flight response. Many people stop doing things or go in places that make them feel anxious. The following videos may help to describe the fight, flight or freeze response. Please go to the links.
So what does anxiety feel like? When we're feeling anxious, the fight, flight or freeze response causes changes to happen within the body. The body starts to produce hormones called adrenaline and cortisol. These are chemicals that make the heart pump faster so that blood can be pumped quickly around the body to reach the muscles. This is why some people might describe feeling a little bit shaky and a little bit unsteady. The muscles need oxygen to prepare them for fight or flight, so this is why we start to breathe quicker. Blood gets pushed away from parts of the body that aren't being used, and this is what creates the feeling of butterflies in the stomach. When we're feeling anxious, we may breathe faster, or we might feel breathless. We might feel our stomachs churning. We might have a painful, tight chest. We may experience heart palpitations, meaning that our heartbeats are more noticeable. The heart might start to race. We might start sweating. We might have tense, sore muscles. Might feel a little bit faint, a little bit dizzy. We may begin to tremble or feel tingling sensations in the body. And we also may have difficulty concentrating. There are lots and lots of reasons why somebody might feel anxious. Some of the more obvious reasons could be things like preparing for an exam, preparing for a job interview, or maybe speaking in public. You may also find that sometimes you're not quite sure why you feel anxious. There may be no reason behind it, or it may be difficult to understand the reason.
There are a number of reasons why people may feel anxious. For example, there may be psychological reasons, such as having negative thoughts about yourself, about other people, or the world around you. You could have early life experiences that are anxiety provoking. You could have learned anxious behaviour from someone else, like a parent or a loved one. There may be social reasons, difficulties experienced because of bullying or the effects of stress at work or at school. You could have relationship problems or difficulties with your peers, and you could have money issues such as debt. Finally, there's also biological reasons. So if a parent or a close relative has experienced anxiety, there could be more of a chance that you could experience anxiety yourself.
The things you think, feel and do when you're anxious can actually just keep the anxiety going. When we are feeling anxious, we might worry all of the time and feel like we can't get the worry under control. So we're going to talk through this cycle and how each one of these things impacts on the other. So that's the way you think, the way you feel and how you behave. So the first thing we're going to talk about is some anxious thoughts you may be having, which could be nobody wants to talk to you. This is then going to impact how you are feeling. So an example could be you may feel uncomfortable, you may feel embarrassed, you may feel lonely. This and then in turn is going to impact on how you behave, what you do. So an example of this could be you may hide in the corner. This is then going to impact on how your body may physically feel. So what symptoms do you have of anxiety? Are you shaking? Are you sweating? Do you have clammy hands? Are you breathing faster? Then this then is going to impact the thoughts you are having. So that takes us back to the top, which is nobody wants to talk to me.
Here's an example of some of the thoughts that you might have when you feel anxious. So there might be thoughts about yourself, I can't cope, I'm going to die, I'm not safe. There might be thoughts about other people. Other people can cope better than me. Someone I love is going to have an accident or die, or the people I love aren't safe. Or there might be thoughts about the future. Bad things will happen. I'll not manage. I won't be able to cope. Or about the world. So the world is unsafe. The world is dangerous and frightening. Just think a little bit about some of these thoughts and see if you recognise any of them in your own thinking. These thoughts that we're talking about are automatic and they're unhelpful. They pop into your mind without you making any effort to think about them. They're very believable, they're usually upsetting, and this can affect the way that you feel and what you do. But it's really important to remember that a thought isn't necessarily a fact or based on any reality. You might believe the unhelpful thoughts that pop into your mind, but it's actually really important to question them because they can be based on unhelpful assumptions. And so when we think about how we're going to manage our anxiety, a really important part of managing anxiety is to question and challenge some of these unhelpful thoughts that you may be getting. Now, there is a pattern to these unhelpful thoughts. They can come into different categories. So knowing the common patterns of unhelpful thoughts can help you to recognise and to challenge them before they have a negative effect on you. So here is a list that we're going to go through of just different types and patterns of unhelpful thinking, and we're going to look at each one in turn.
The first unhelpful thinking style I'm going to talk about is catastrophizing. So people may commonly catastrophize whenever they're feeling anxious. This means their anxiety makes them feel like something that's happened is far worse than it really is. An example of this would be, my mum's late coming home, she must have been in an accident. The second unhelpful thinking style is black and white thinking. When people are feeling anxious, they'll often say things as black or white and no in between. An example of this would be, I failed that exam, I'm going to fail my whole degree. Another unhelpful thinking style is emotional reasoning. So this means treating emotions as if they're solely facts. An example would be, I feel anxious, something bad is going to happen. Another unhelpful thinking style is must and should statements. People will often live by fixed rules for themselves about what they should do and how they should feel, and judge themselves quite harshly if they don't follow these exact rules. So an example of this would be, I should be able to cope, I must be calm at all times. Another unhelpful thinking style is jumping to conclusions. People often assume they know what others are thinking, and the assumptions are usually about the future. They might be frightening, there may be what if thoughts that run through people's minds. An example of this would be, a friend doesn't say hello when you see them across the street. You may automatically think you must have done something terrible, you must have done something to upset them, when in fact the reality is they just didn't see you. Another unhelpful thinking style is overgeneralizing. So this is based on one isolated incident. People that use this thinking pattern assume that all future events will follow a similar pattern, and it becomes hard for them to see a negative event as just a one-off. An example of this would be, after failing one exam, if you use this kind of thinking style, you will think you won't ever be able to pass any other exams and your next exam's coming up. Okay, so another unhelpful thinking style is personalization. People who think this way believe everything is to do with them, and it's usually negative. So they place a lot of blame on themselves for no logical reason. An example of this would be, my friend is in a bad mood today, I must have done something to upset them, when in reality your friend's bad day could have absolutely nothing to do with you. A further unhelpful thinking style is dismissing the positives. Often people can ignore the positive aspects of life or certain situations, and instead they will solely just focus on the negatives. An example of this would be, your teacher gives you a really good school report, but you're absolutely certain that they're only saying positive, nice things because that's what they have to do.
And finally, another unhelpful thinking pattern is known as labeling. And this is when people who are often anxious who can label themselves in a negative way. So for example, I didn't cope well today, I'm pathetic. I couldn't speak in front of the class, I'm stupid. By labeling ourselves in a negative way, we are making ourselves feel anxious and helping to continue to feel anxious. Once you've recognized an unhelpful thought, the next stage is to challenge it. And to do this, you need to ask yourself a series of questions. When you have an unhelpful thought, it makes you feel anxious, which can create more negative feelings. So look at the situation that you're in. Okay, what's happening? So for example, my mum's supposed to be home 20 minutes ago and she's not back yet. Then ask yourself, how does that make me feel? So it might make you feel scared, it might make you feel anxious. What's going through my mind as I think that my mum isn't back yet and I'm feeling quite anxious? And the unhelpful thought might be that my mum's been in an accident. This creates a kind of negative cycle, a situation which creates a feeling and then creates an unhelpful thought. You can see through these boxes how that cycle is maintained. So a situation creates a feeling, which creates an unhelpful thought, which then keeps the worry kind of going.
Now you can challenge unhelpful thoughts by asking yourself some of the following questions. Is there any evidence against the thought? Is there any evidence for the thought? But could you base this evidence on facts? Can you identify if you are using an unhelpful thinking pattern or an unhelpful thinking style? Is there another way to look at the situation? Is there a proactive solution to the thought? And what would you say to a friend who was in a similar situation?
So asking yourself a series of these questions can help you to manage your worry. Remember, anxious people spend a lot of time worrying, but worry is only useful when it reminds you to do something. Otherwise, it's just a thought that's getting stuck in an unhelpful loop. One of the most frustrating things about anxiety is that it can make you feel that you have no control over how much you worry. And managing how much you worry can lower your anxiety. So one way to do this is to set aside some worry time. This can help you to feel in control of the worry so it doesn't feel overwhelming. In order to complete worry time, you can follow the next 5 steps. Step 1 is to set aside a time in the day that's worry time. This should last about 10 to 15 minutes. At other times, remind yourself that you have worry time put aside already and try not to think about your worries until then. Once your worry time arrives, start timing yourself so it doesn't go on for longer than 15 minutes. During worry time, let yourself worry. Don't even try to come up with solutions. Focus entirely on being worried. Stop as soon as your worry time is finished or earlier, as you might run out of worries before the 15 minutes is up. Another way to help thinking about managing anxiety is to improve your quality of life. You can do this by doing certain things such as doing activities. Doing something that you enjoy will give you less time to spend worrying and make you feel better overall. Some suggestions might be to do some exercise, go for a walk, go for a run, spend time with a friend or a family member, or watch your favourite TV shows, or go on YouTube and look for things that make you smile. Another technique to help manage anxiety would be through breathing exercises. Breathing exercises can help you to feel calmer and reduce your anxiety. The controlled breathing technique involves focusing on and slowing down your breathing. It's particularly helpful if you feel dizzy or lightheaded when you get anxious. In order to complete controlled breathing, you have to get in a comfortable position. You could lie in your bed or sit on a comfortable chair. Try to breathe in a steady rhythm. Breathe in for 3 seconds, hold this breath for 2 seconds, and then breathe out for 3 seconds. It can be helpful to count as you do this. For example, in, 1, 2, 3, hold, 1, 2, out, 1, 2, 3. Repeat the steady breathing for a few minutes. You should soon begin to feel a bit more relaxed. If you're feeling dizzy, then this should get better after a few minutes. Another anxiety management technique is known as grounding, and this is a good technique to fend off symptoms of anxiety and stress when you're feeling overwhelmed. Grounding involves trying to take your mind off uncomfortable symptoms or thoughts. So exercise 1 would be to start by sitting in a comfortable place and by taking a deep breath. Then try to focus on the following. Focus on 5 things that you can see, 4 things that you can feel, 3 things that you can hear, 2 things that you can smell, and 1 thing that you can taste. Exercise 2 is to sit or stand in a comfortable position. Imagine that you have an empty balloon in your stomach. Try to inflate the balloon by breathing through your nose. Breathe in through your nose to the count of 3. As you breathe in, your stomach should come outwards as you like inflating the balloon. Now slowly deflate the balloon by breathing out through your mouth. Inflate and deflate the balloon a few times until you feel calmer. Another thing to think about in terms of reducing anxiety is around reducing avoidance. People can often get into the habit of avoiding situations that make them feel anxious. It makes sense. Why would you want to put yourself in a situation that makes you feel uncomfortable? But this can unfortunately make the problem worse. The longer you avoid a situation, the more intimidating it becomes. So the more that you avoid, the worse your anxiety gets. For example, if you worry about other people judging you negatively, you might avoid going out socially. And this means that you might stay at home and avoid social events. and you might avoid speaking in front of people. A really crucial way of learning to manage anxiety is to actually confront the things that you avoid. And you can do this by making a list of situations that you often try to escape from or you try to avoid. An example, you might be talking in front of the class. Give each situation a difficulty score out of 10. If a situation causes no anxiety, you'd rate it as a 0. If it causes extreme anxiety, you'd rate it as a 10. Try to put the situations in order from the least anxious to the most anxious. Here's an example. Once you've made your list, the next thing to do is to keep confronting the situation that makes you feel the least anxious every day if you can. If you can't do it every day, try not to wait too long between the times that you can confront the situation. The more that you confront the situation, the less fear you'll feel. Remember, there's nothing to fear except the feeling of fear, and the feeling is not a fact. It's just a feeling, and we can manage feelings. So every time you experience the situation that makes you feel anxious, you should notice that your anxiety starts to get a little better. So each time you confront a situation, your anxiety comes down. When you feel comfortable with the situation that causes you the least anxiety, you can then move to the next one on your list and repeat the process. This repetition of confronting a situation time and time and time again that makes you feel anxious is known as the habituation curve. So when you avoid situations because they make you anxious or distressed, your anxiety rises quite sharply. And it stays at that level for a while, but then it slowly starts to decrease over the course of time. If you didn't avoid the situation and you stuck with it, you confronted your fear, you'd find that the first time would feel the worst. But each time after that, you'll find that you won't feel quite as anxious as the time before. The anxiety will start to pass a little quicker than previous, and so the diagram might look a little more like this. So basically, the more that you confront the anxious situation, the less you become anxious about it. So your anxiety goes down as you confront the situation. Your anxiety will stay the same or get worse if you avoid. So in terms of what do I do to manage and deal with my anxiety, this is what you need to do. You need to confront the situation, learn that you can manage it, learn that you can deal with it, learn that you can tolerate that feeling of anxiety and be able to be okay. Once you come to this realization, your anxiety will naturally start to come down. So that's the end of our workshop on anxiety. We've talked a little bit about what anxiety is. We've thought about how it affects the way that you think and how it affects what you do. And we've had a brief look at different ways and techniques of managing anxiety. So I hope you found that useful and helpful. In the next few slides, we've just put some resources up, some apps that may be helpful to you, and also some books that we use in our clinics regularly that we think are really helpful for young people in helping them manage their anxiety. So thanks once again for listening. And please remember that you have the ability to control your anxiety. You can be in charge of it, not it be in charge of you. Thanks a lot.